Welcome back to a long overdue episode of Capturing the Intangibles. It's been a minute, but we're back in the saddle talking about decision-making in business related to product, investments, and people, and when to trust the data or simply your gut. Hit us up and let us know your feedback. Hey guys, welcome back into a long overdue episode of Capturing the Intangibles. It's been a while, needless to say. I think we've been pretty busy, scatterbrain, any other type of things you can describe. But how you guys been? Mike, it looks like you're in a whole new setup there. What you got going on?
Yeah, I got moved in. We shifted offices, so I moved into an office space in the city over here. Digging it. Old brewery that they converted into office space. Managed to fancy the place up with some neon signage and everything. So
I see that. You know this already, how jealous I am of that, but people are going to see that. And, you selling them or what? Can you get other people some?
I can absolutely. I'll share the PayPal details after the podcast.
Awesome. Massimo, have you decided if you want to be in the Netherlands or Italy yet?
Well, today I'm in the Netherlands actually, but maybe the next podcast you're gonna see my home office in Milan. So that would be really, really good. And yeah, this is a long time we didn't do a podcast, so I'm looking forward to pick up the pace and really talk about a lot of things that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, awesome, guys. So I had a topic in mind, maybe a little bit vague, but something that's been kind of weighing on me a little bit. But I wanted to talk about the gut feelings you get in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is how do you make decisions? How do you ultimately go one way or another? Is it solely or should it be based on, say, tangible empirical data? Or when does that gut feeling really take over, and when and why do you use that sort of feeling? And we'll go through some examples. But really, let's kind of start at the top. So Massimo, let me start with you. When I say something about the gut feeling in business, surely you've gone through this in the past, right? So what's your initial thoughts on what does it mean when you get like a gut feeling?
Yeah, the gut feeling is where through different experiences that you had, you build up a certain knowledge, a certain sixth sense almost, where you understand that what type of decision you can make, and you do that in 1 second. So in 1 second you can judge if certain things is a good decision or not, or and then maybe after that you start to think about that, and then you put the business value or the business justifications and other market analysis, and then you say maybe it's not. But that gut feeling is the 1 second decision. It's because you have built up certain experience. You probably have done many projects, which some have succeeded, some have failed. So you need also to be have been part of failed projects to learn of things, right? And then, but if you have done that, um, then you have a sense of, okay, this is a good thing or not to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw some research on this that, just kind of doing some basic research for myself on this sort of subject. And, right brain, left brain, where does that play into this? And if everything that I've read says that, the rational side of your brain is all empirical, right? It's got the capacity to say, hey, I've seen this, I know this data, so thus do this. It's like a programming style, if then that, right? But
Yes.
the creative side of your brain, from what I understand, has so much access to like history and things that you take for granted at a certain time that may not be such a heavily weighted matter of fact, that almost the creative side takes over more when you get those sort of gut feelings. So
Yeah.
it could be that when you're getting that gut feeling, it is based on experience, but it's just sort of reaching into that creative side of your brain. It's almost like in your subconscious that's based on experiences in the past that they're kind of trapped, right? But it almost implies that there are levels to this sort of gut feeling, and that's what I kind of want to weed out here at first. Is when we're talking about the gut feeling specifically in business, it's not about just an opinion, right? Like you can bring me a net new problem about blockchain technology. I may have an opinion, but do I have a lot of background? No, I don't. So I wouldn't constitute that as a gut feeling. Gut feeling is almost emotional, and you can't
Mhm.
have an emotional connection with something unless somehow you've pieced together in your subconscious or in the empirical rational side of your brain to get to a decision. But I guess the question then becomes is what do you trust? How do you reconcile that? But Mike, let me kick it over to you. What's your initial sort of thoughts around, if and when you get these sort of gut feelings, when are they useful or not?
I think it's interesting, especially to what Massimo said. I think oftentimes, gut feelings, when you have a gut feeling, it's typically about a problem or some challenge that you faced. So you yourself have this very, very personal attachment or association with some sort of challenge over here. And you imagine that other people just like you are going through the same thing. So you anticipate no one's asking for it necessarily, but we share a same similar set of conclusions where, hey, there's a market need for this particular feature, this product, this experience, whatever it might be. And that's what drives a lot of that gut feeling and following of a gut feeling, which is why we have such a rich startup environment and atmosphere, especially in the US. But why it's such a big, huge opportunity, because you can take a lot of moonshots here and fund those gut feelings to see which ones actually change the market or change the way that people interact with technology, the outside world around them, and so on. So for me, I think gut feelings, if you're going to be very, very analytical, and if you're going to be very quantitative about every single decision that you make, then everything is very, very iterative. Nothing is visionary. No one's taking moonshots over here. But when you talk about things like, recently, over the last few months, guys, we've been working on things like process intelligence. This is something that has a market. So I'm not saying that this is a complete absolute gut feel. But when you look at, the way that we've built our solution stack at Infor, clearly you don't need to do a dearth of analysis to say this is a good idea, right? Because when you actually start to look at how these different modules vertically integrate and weave in with one another, then you start to say, like, this is a no-brainer. I mean, maybe we fail, right? But and maybe it's a gut feel that doesn't pan out. But at the same time, it's half moonshot and just a good idea, and it's something that we should pursue and persevere at. So scaling that down a little bit, and just to kind of wrap up the thought, I see it on a daily basis as well. You have customers that are experiencing, frictions or issues with how a software workflow works, and they'll tell you exactly what they want. I don't want to have to click this button 3 times, or I expect this other feature or capability to perform in this particular way. But if all you're ever going to do is prioritize a roadmap based on what other people want, it's zebra by committee, right? It's a horse by committee. You get a zebra. And sometimes you have to take those, gut feeling initiatives to market and say, you know what, we're going to re-rationalize how we're going to improve this process from the ground up here. And I have a vision of how we're going to do that. And oftentimes, if you wait for a customer to ask you for something truly innovative, then it's already too late, because someone else is already going to bring it to the market.
Yeah, I have an example. What Mike was actually saying is very, very important, on the quantitative analysis, and that you only do iterations, but not big things. So I love this example of, if Apple would not have brought in the market a touch phone, we would have continued to have plastic keyboard phones, right? So if you are on the BlackBerry side, management or CEO, you would say, hey, I'm selling a lot of millions of Blackberries, right? Why would I do a new product, right? Why would I do a touch phone, right? And I just continue to do a better BlackBerry. The customers ask me just a better BlackBerry and a better BlackBerry. But then something disruptive comes in, that another CEO of another company has this gut feeling like, hey, but this can revolutionize the entire industry. Let's build a touch phone, right? So, and then brings to the market, and then completely just legacy immediately. The same is now, I'm predicting as well that there might be a company working on what's next after a touch phone, right? So maybe there is a different technology that's coming out. Now, even Apple is making a better touch phone, like Samsung is doing. So we are now in the iterative mode. We are waiting now for the next gut feeling coming in, and then have the courage to invest and do that, right? Because you as a CEO need to have the courage. But you can do a better and better iterative. At some point, someone is going to come and make you irrelevant in an industry. And so the gut feeling is exactly what you need to stay ahead of innovation and so on.
Yeah, so a couple of points on that. We can even take it relevant to ourselves. Right now, we're going through like this big UX uplift, right? And it can be like a daunting task, but we try to break it down into pieces. But you get into, well, how do I want a persona to relate to a particular workspace, right? If you try to get too tactical with it, it immediately becomes boring, just like that. But when you describe, or you get someone really creative in the room to say, oh, I haven't seen this ERP engine before, I don't even know this process flow, but if I was a typical user and I'd go in and do this and that, that's a gut feeling, right? Like that's something that doesn't necessarily have upfront in your face empirical, tangible rationale behind it. We can ask that individual, why'd you make that decision? Oh, it just felt right. So UX type projects, it requires that sort of gut feeling, right? But one thing that you said, Massimo, and Mike, you alluded to this too, is like, now granted, you can take this to extremes, right? But if you're too dependent on data and the tangible rationale and the empirical research, then to a certain extent, at least in the product space, that can tend to create like this follower culture and mentality. Like you have to have that mix of, hey, you know what? We're just going to go off of this gut feeling. Everyone's kind of feeling this way. If more people are having this same gut feeling, hey, we might have something here, right? And that's how you have to challenge it. But I almost think about too, there's different time periods where this happens in business too. So I kind of wrote down like three types of life cycle of the business, right? You could have let's call it a stale business. Like it's maybe not failing, but your growth is kind of low. You're trying to figure things out. Maybe you've lost some market share. Then you've got, let's call it a normal business. You're sustaining. You're based on that annuity. You're doing well, but things are just rolling along. But then you've got the high growth. Like you're looking for that velocity, right? And you're trying to gain market share. You're trying to increase, trying to get above 30% quarter over quarter growth, especially in the software space. Now, I'm curious your opinions in each one of those. Is it always gut feeling? Is it more rational? So, Mike, maybe I'll put you on the spot, but based on let's just start with a stale business. Let's say the business is starting to show signs of less maturity, right? You're the CEO. How would you start to look at making decisions? Would it be more empirical based? Would it be more gut feeling? Would it be more, let's take a leap? Is it a balance? What is it? What's your initial thought?
I think for each one of those tiers, I think if you were to put it on a graph, it would look a lot like an inverse bell curve, right? Instead of, up, it would be down, right? So I think for the first tier, down on their luck, hardship company, I think you're more likely, I mean, if you want to succeed, or not even succeed, if you want to stay in the market, then I think you clearly have identified that what you're doing just ain't returning anything on the investment, right? So you're predominantly driven by having to follow your gut. Like, we need to take a risk here. Even if that risk is catastrophic implosion of the company, if that's the direction that you're already heading, then you really need to follow your gut, follow your instinct, or try and enter in new markets by taking a moonshot. And I think on the opposite side of the spectrum, especially those high growth stages as well, you tend to be driven by a lot of your gut in market creation there. And I think it's that middle tier where you tend to see more quantitative, like, well, let's take a look. Let's see how this affects our business. Let's see if, what's the upside, what's the opportunity cost. So I think it's like a little bit of an inverse bell curve in that respect. So I think for that down on their luck company, I think if you're faced with the reality, the harsh reality, that it's, we're already going to be out of business this time next year, for example, why continue the same sales strategy, go to market, or R&D investments, whatever it might be, whether you're manufacturing a widget and maybe you are operating in the wrong market space, or you're working with software, right? You need to change something around because everyone's going to be out of a job this time next year anyway. So let's use this as an initiative and use that inertia to try and basically bail out the ship and try something fundamentally new. And yeah, it's high risk, very high reward if it actually does pan out. But I think, it's a very Darwinian response in that case. Like, your only option is basically follow your gut, follow your instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. Massimo,
Absolutely.
how about you?
Yeah, I think, if you are on the third phase already, like you say, oh, you're losing market, and all that, that's way too late. So hopefully you get acquired, and maybe you get some money of
I
the
don't know. Hold on,
acquisition.
hold on. I just want to interrupt. Apple was on their way out, and they were about to back in the '90s. Remember? And then
Yes,
Bill
Oh yeah,
Gates.
good
Yeah.
yes.
point.
So the thing is,
Bill Gates helped them. So yeah, but you got money to reinvest, right? So either you are acquired or you get an investment. That's good. But the thing is, when you are in the upper growth and you want to stabilize or go into the second phase, right? So that is where you're going to think about already on the next things that you should be doing, right? But with financial discipline. What I mean with that is I've seen also company to follow too much the gut feeling, right, and get out, out of bankrupt because all this innovation never came to the market and they never got a customer. So when the gut feeling, you do the gut feeling, you do it in a very disciplined way, right? So you really balance the good investments that you have with the new investment, but you're very serious to put, your bets on the new horses because those are the ones that is going to take you, there in the next things. Think about Apple going back, not the BlackBerry and the phone, but now the new M1 and M2 chipsets. What is in Intel was doing, what was Intel doing all these years? The battle is how much performance per watt you're going to have in laptops. That's when you're going to win the battle. And they're now all of a sudden have these chips that performs forever, while Intel is now trying to catch up. Is it late? Time will tell. We don't know, right? But so the way if you analyze too many data and too many things, then you're not going to get in phase 2 and 3, and it's too late, right? And if you are a fan of Simon Sinek and you saw the video of start with a why, you said, Rick, right? The left brain has access to the human decision making. Even if you are on the right side, you have all the data and all the market analysis, and you say, yeah, this sounds really right, but you're not deciding because there is the left brain that tapped into deeper and says, it sounds right, but I'm still not doing it. So you see the video, if the guys on the podcast see the video, start with a why, it tells you why, because that taps it directly into your decision making of the human, right? So if you do the gut feeling really starts most of the time with the why. You have the answer of the why. Why are we doing a touch phone? Why are we doing a better, a revolutionary new chipset for a computer? Why are we building a software for a certain business problems, right? So Simon was saying in the call, in the video, Apple does laptops like HP or IBM or others, Lenovo or Dell. If there are laptops, they have all talented people. That's fine. But why people choose Apple more than the others, or they love the brand, because they can explain the why they did it, right?
Yeah.
And they can explain the why they did it because some of the decisions are innovative and they come from the gut feeling, not from the, I've over analyzed everything and now I decide to do this type of product. That's never going to be a gut feeling thing.
so actually, you got me thinking. Actually, something interesting here, especially on the far end of like the high growth side of the spectrum, Rick. But Massimo, to what you're saying, I was just starting to think. You have the startup VC model, especially over in Silicon Valley, although that's proliferated throughout the rest of the country. And that very model is basically let's take a chunk of our holdings and let's invest 10 million in 100 companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know 90% of them are going to fold. One out of every 10 is actually going to be, sustain itself, and one out of every 100 or whatever is going to be, a unicorn with $1 billion valuation within 2 years, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not interested in stable growth. They are looking for rocket ship growth. Now, the reason why I bring this up, because then I start to think about a company like Google. And Google has taken a lot of that same model, that venture model, and they brought that in house. But it's Google that's creating each one of these products. So they're taking these bets. They're following their gut instinct, right? They're investing in these ideas, and what you end up with is ultimately a very big identity crisis. Because if you go to, I was just looking at it right now, killedbygoogle.com, 273 products that they've killed. That's
Wow.
273 products that they've created, that they've taken a bet on, follow their gut, and then subsequently killed. And now, if you read article publications like Ars Technica, they have like their own little section on what has Google killed this week. They have 3 or 4 different chat applications and so on. So I think, taken to its logical extreme, that pursuit of growth can actually act contrary to your actual strategic interests, because then you have a customer demographic that's actually less likely to absorb or bet on these services or enjoy them, because you're more likely to kill them off because it didn't show that unicorn like rocket ship trajectory.
Yeah, it's a risk, of course, and that's why you do better with the customers. Sometimes you do have input of the customers, but the gut feeling starts with an idea that you mostly have also a you see the problem and you just understand it immediately. You just can connect all the dots immediately, and you have a blueprint of, oh, this is what we should build, or this is what we should do. You have that napkin idea, that a startup has. And so, yeah, my pitch is the 3 companies, or the 3 states of what status of what Rick was saying is, the gut feeling is good, but with financial discipline, right? So I've seen also company going down because they were stubborn to just go down and say, this was a good idea. Let's burn more money, and then you fail. You need also to understand when you have to get out. You have failed. That's fine. Maybe you learned a lot of things. Maybe the next gut feeling is going to be even better. But just get out on time. Don't burn more money, because that is not good at as well. And my admiration of Apple about the M1 and M2 chip story versus Intel or AMD, to be honest, is that it didn't come from a startup. It came from a very well big established company that inside they could just sit down and keep doing the same, iteration of better and better chips, but they felt like, hey, we need to do something new here, and we got a gut feeling that we can do it better for our customers, right? And so they did it. So a big company did it. The inside innovation, that gut feeling was inside the big company, and they did it. It most what you see here, the person who leave Apple will start a startup, and with that gut feeling, we'll start a new startup building a new chipset. But my admiration that Apple did inside, and unfortunately, a lot of big companies, it has to happen that you have to leave to build that innovation. And VC money comes everywhere. There is VC money everywhere, right? But when there is VC money inside, invest inside, oh, there is no money for that, right? So that's what my admiration to Apple, that they did it inside in a bigger company.
Yeah, that's so. Let me come back to that in just a second, Massimo, because I was connecting some dots here. Remember, I said that when we're talking about gut feelings, there's an emotional attachment to it that's based on that historical things that are locked into the creative side of your brain. But then I wanted to ask, how do you avoid going from emotional to fully whimsical, right? Because you can have those investments, but you just said it. It's kind of like the you as an executive of an organization would say, we need to control that workout. Rollout, sorry. If you have an idea or concept that's based on gut feeling and at least some empirical knowledge about that, you still have to make sure that you're controlling that rollout. Yes, there's an investment up front, but you can't just snowball that. You have to have some checks and balances going along that. But one thing I want to challenge, Mike, one thing you were saying on, and Massimo, this is what I think you were just hitting on, is that you were impressed that Apple did it from within, because the Microsoft model or others that you were alluding to, Mike, or let's just say a technology holding company, is that gut feelings, or is that a financial transaction? Is it, I believe that if I spread my risk in 10 companies, that, yeah, of course, I might have a good feeling about a particular company, but when I'm spreading that out, the chances of me hitting on one of these, I'm going to get X% return, thus meaning that it's a good financial transaction for me to invest in this 10. The reason I bring it up is because my argument would be is that when you have companies doing it in that manner, it minimizes their risk in each individual company. Thus, that gut feeling doesn't have to be as strong. So that's why, Massimo, I completely agree with you that those organizations that can do it organically within, that's impressive. Because, I mean,
Yes,
I've been a part of situations where we've gone through this struggle in different phases, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I I do like that if we've got a method of controlling those sort of rollouts, but having this balance is certainly important. How about some more examples? So I've got one. Do you guys mind if I start? I've actually got
Sure.
two.
No, go for it.
So the first one, I'm going to stay on the product side, and then Massimo, I know you've got some examples, maybe people in HR related, because it's a full business, right? We don't want to just talk about product, but a good example from our perspective is you guys were a part of this as well. Remember when we started to conceive and build out our ML platform solution?
Mm-hmm.
The initial thought, the empirical evidence would have said, why would you guys invest in not building our own? We were building on top of AWS. We have a great partnership there, but why would you guys invest in doing this when there's other AI vendors out there? Why is that so important? All the data, all the readily available stuff would say we should have partnered. But there was something, especially Massimo, you and I had multiple conversations about this. There was something there that said, this is going to be an important part of the market. And it's so closely related to our data strategies. And Mike, your data fabric ownership of your piece here at our company, right? It's so important, not just to Infor, but to our customers to have that closely aligned to a single solution, that ultimately we just said the gut feeling just says, yeah, maybe the easier answer might be to say to partner. But long term, does that give us that gut feeling that we can't provide the best solution for our customers in the end? And thus giving our company so I think that's where we went with our gut and said, you know what, we got to invest and build this, even though the empirical evidence at the time said, no, that's not a good idea.
I think a lot of that empirical evidence also is, hey, is this going to pay off within a year's time? And especially when did we start Coleman? That was
3.5
20 minutes
years ago.
and 4 years. Yeah, 4 years ago. Especially coming from an enterprise business software background and market, if you hear, hey, great, we're about to invest in machine learning, I think a lot of people would say that's not your competency. That's not what you specialize in. So how are you going to compete in this market, and what value do you offer someone else that specializes in this directly? And I think it's very easy to rationalize and justify why an idea like this should not get any sort of investment. I think a lot of companies would make the same decision.
Yep.
That's not our bread and butter, right? And that would be that middle tier, going back to, business is good, growth is steady, but, we don't need to take any unnecessary risks because, there's a whole lot of downside. Sure, there might be upside, but there's a whole lot of downside. So I think you kind of have to follow your gut in that case, because you're basically saying, look, if we don't do this now, in 4 years when this market matures, 5 years when this market matures, we are now 5 years behind the curve. And now we have to play catch up and develop a parity Me Too solution with the rest of the market, which is exactly what you were saying earlier. Like there's this inclination for companies to not innovate, but deliver their own spin on something that already exists, because, my other 4 competitors are already doing the same. Now I have to have an offering here as well.
Yeah, and
so
it's too late.
It really is following your gut to say, look, this is not going to pay off in the first year, 18 months, 2 years. But when we start to look at this on a 5-year, 10-year event horizon, when this market matures, when people actually start to realize the value, when knowledge starts to disseminate into our customer base, then we are already 5 years ahead of the market. In fact, that makes you a market maker, right? So you kind of have to drive those types of decisions based on gut, because how else can you justify taking such a large bet in a gamble?
Yeah, and I can go through exactly when we start to talk about ML in the enterprise software, especially in the software that we deliver, in a certain industry. Our software really optimizes business processes, right? So, either you are, food and beverage, automotive, aerospace and defense, or in healthcare. At the end of the day, we are delivering something that optimizes business processes and runs the business processes. So the gut feeling kicks in if Rick comes to me and say, hey, there is this new technology, with machine learning that, based on, data and input from everywhere, it can predict things and can optimize things, even, not programmatically, not like that you program it, but now it's a living entity that learns itself and can automatically optimize and predict and change even the business processes. And he learns how the customers use in a certain industry, and he does it automatically with full automation. yeah, that's actually the gut feeling immediately you get is, oh, but this is going to revolutionize the world I'm living in into totally something different, right? I may not have a solution like Mike says in a 1 year, but this is going to be completely embedded. This is going to be the new soul of the software. It's not something satellite on the side. That's why we believe there was a new soul in the new software, and it could not be a partner because you actually now it's going to be, it's not going to be you anymore. It's not going to be your person anymore, right? So that's why the gut feeling was immediately like, oh, this is going to be the new soul of our software. It has to be us doing this and not someone else. And that gut feeling, I got it in 1-2 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. And what it meant, from a operational perspective to develop investments, that comes down there. But the immediate reaction was, we got to do this because of these reasons, right?
Yeah, I mean, shameless plug here, but go check out the enterprise application platform research that's just now starting, right? I think we take a lot of pride in a lot of the things that we've built even within our group. And this isn't a marketing thing about our technology. It's just an example of, hey, we were able to get out ahead of something and have something that's now arguably maybe one of the most mature and most innovative pieces of cloud platform technology in the space, right? So you've got to have that willingness to embrace those kind of gut feelings that could equal those sort of results. So let me move on to another, a different, maybe a little bit more funny or fun example. So away from the product side, Jamie Tart, the footballer, right? The fictitious football player, scored a ton of goals, right? Had all the statistics, was a well sought after player.
You've gone whimsical, by the way.
Exactly. That's okay. Roll with it. There was something about him, right, that you couldn't quite place your finger on. In the clubhouse, it caused something, right? So there was an aspect of everything on paper told you got to give the ball to Jamie. You got to give the ball to Jamie. You got to give him space. He's got to get more touches. But at the end of the day, in the clubhouse, there was this gut feeling that something wasn't right, and they made the change. And what happened? I think even in that season they went up to the next league, right? But so there's example.
They did script it that way.
It's real, and I believe it. But seriously, like, take that into our lives. Massimo, you talk about this, about call it your people skills or however you want to categorize it. But you've talked to me a lot of times about how you like to analyze, especially for new employees or exiting employees or anything around that nature. Tell me your experience that may be analogous to that sort of example.
Yeah, it could be a little bit scary because I developed this sixth sense that if I talk to a person, if I talk to a person in 10, 15 minutes, I can say I'm going to hire this person or not. Actually, maybe 10 minutes even. And that's been not because I read the entire CV. I've heard all the big experience with all the skill set, all the domain knowledge that this person may have. But I got this gut feeling that this person has a huge potential, right? That's what I'm looking. And I can feel it. This person has a huge potential. Maybe doesn't have a big domain expertise, but this person has a huge potential to make whatever project, whatever product, whatever process that this person has to go that he or she doesn't know today, but this person can make it own very quickly because highly motivated, independent, and that potential, that's what I like to I just feel it, that happened. And how I learned, I don't know, maybe by experience or maybe something that I have, but just need that. I just need that. And you expand example about the soccer player.
I just want to say I'm so touched that you would say all this about me, Massimo.
Did I do the interview? I don't remember. I thought it was a negative result. I said that after 10 minutes, not mine.
That was Rick's gut feeling then.
Well, I didn't hire Rick, actually. It was Emily that she hired us. So maybe she had the same gut feeling as well. But yeah, it's you can overanalyze everything, but at the end of the day, you have to make a judgment. And you can say, yeah, all the data is okay, but I don't like this Rick guy. I don't know why. I come back with this Simon Sinek. I don't like this Rick guy, right? So and people I look from the potential perspective. Does this person has a huge potential to make everything, do everything essentially, right? So I hate the consulting firms. I was saying name, but they make you go through all these tests. Have you seen on YouTube? You go and you see all these hiring tests. They give you a business case. You have to work out the plan and all of that. And then they come with all the data why they should sell an iWatch through, this new watch through, Verizon and AT&T partnership instead of having own shops, right? Where is the gut feeling there? There is zero gut feeling. And I hate those. Just go and, go to YouTube and these
Everything is a
cases,
box and
I'm
a
telling
model.
you.
Everything is a model, and you follow the model, right?
Exactly. But good analysis, but there's no gut feeling. Ain't gonna happen for this type of, profiles.
So two things. One, I feel the need to say Massimo doesn't not like those consulting firms. He just doesn't like that practice of hiring that maybe some companies like to use. So let's just be very clear there. Mike, you said something that almost made me like kind of twinge a little bit. But when you said model, it's almost like when you get too much on the empirical side, you create this aversion. Massimo, you're just now describing you almost hate having a model, and models are good, right? It's again about that balance. But as soon as you say model, I'm like, oh crap, that means it's got boundaries to it, and you've got to meet this criteria. When it's not that simple, there's a finesse game to everything that we do, whether it's HR related, whether it's product development, whether it's sales, whether it's consulting services. It can't all fit into this box, right? But
I know. So I remember even back in high school when I was applying, I had a high school job at Best Buy, and when you apply, they'll hire just about anyone. But you have to go through a fairly, at the time for my age, seemed like a very rigorous questionnaire. It was like 60, 100 questions or something like that. It's a personality profile, and they're asking questions about what would you do if you saw a friend stealing in the store? Would you report this, or how would you handle this? And they ask 4 or 5 different flavors of this question. Then they move on to the next series of questions, because what they're trying to do is they are trying to optimize for upside and reduce downside, right? And they've determined the parameters where someone has to fall into to be a good enough employee. They're not looking for an all-star employee that's going to exceed every single metric. And they're not looking to create an entire workforce of similarly performing, high-performing employees. What they're trying to do is staff up a multinational corporate big box store with dependable, responsible people that, generally speaking, are going to help contribute to the success of the business. But what you're doing is you are, at the same time, you're excluding all of the outliers of profiles that you don't want to hire, because of course they're not going to be, they could be lazy, they could be stealing, they could be doing all sorts of negligent things. But you're also excluding the top end of the spectrum, because those very, very high performers, you're more likely to exclude them because they don't fit the narrative or that box of the model that you've set over here. So they can be very, very dependable for producing positive results at scale. But when you shrink that down, I remember going through a hire about a year and a half ago, where we had someone applying for a data warehousing analyst position. They had the right background, they had the right technical skill sets, they had the experience. And we went with someone that had none of that experience, because culturally they were a better fit. They showed an aptitude for learning a whole lot more. And I think if I could meet me in the alternative universe, for every split, every decision you make, right, there's another universe that spins off. I'm pretty sure that other universe where we hired that other person, that product is half as complete as it is today, based on the hire that we made. And that's a gut feeling that even though this other person ticked all the boxes, I don't think we would have performed nearly as competently and completely as an organizational unit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, completely agree. All right, guys, why don't we wrap it there for today? I've really enjoyed it today. Mike, you got to get me one of those signs for the next episode. We'll try to pick this up a little bit. We won't wait. Good Lord. I don't know when the last time we completed one of these, but we'll get back on a regular routine. But guys, I appreciate it as always. And we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
See you next time.